the final Anvil update. I know people have been waiting for this update for a bit longer than expected, but the update is out now. For those who don't want to listen to me ramble on about the update, I have a changelog and update documentation linked in the description below. And so, without further ado, allow me to go over exactly what is in this update. The biggest change comes from scale. The Anvil game types now use 330x scaling, which is the same scaling that Rabbids game types use. I understand the frustration of switching away from 47x after 2 updates, but to be honest, 330x is just better than 47x in every way. You can get higher scalings, you can get more precise scalings at lower scales, and it comes with more options. Not to mention that pretty much every modern game type mod is going to use 330x scaling, if it has scaling. For clarity's sake, I'll go over all the options available for scale in this update. Red Team activates Cosmic Scaling. This is an additional scale range that ranges from 330 times scale all the way up to 110,000 times scale, approximately. At this scale range, even a traffic cone can cover the entirety of Forge World. Blue Team activates Shadowcaster with Cosmic Scaling. While it is pretty cool to see a shadow cover the entire map and then some, it should be noted that these shadows will sometimes bug out for low-end machines. Green Team activates the regular Shadowcaster. Not much to say here, it's the same as it was before. Orange and Purple Team activate 2 different attachment options for the scaled object. Purple Team will attach it to a flag stand, disabling the object's normal hitbox, which is still active even when it's scaled up. Orange Team does the same thing, however it also disables the projectile hitbox, which applies to the scaled up object's scaled visuals. This can be useful for performance, especially when you have lots of these scaled up trees. Yellow Team is still the individual object scale toggle. Pink Team activates the same option as Orange Team, but for cosmic scale objects. This is primarily useful for when you have your entire map encased inside of a cosmic scale object. As you can see, the Warthog tires, among other things, will spaz out. This has no effect on gameplay, it's just a visual glitch, and setting it to Pink Team fixes it. Finally, we have Brown Team, which activates the invisible scaled object. Essentially, in the CGB, the object will be invisible, but any collision, projectile, or regular, will be maintained. To clear up any confusion, the scale object will have whatever collision it had prior to being hidden. This does not cause any sort of scaled collision. This is useful for creating invisible walls, which projectiles cannot pass through, or just invisible walls, like real invisible walls. Within the Forge mode, the Toolbar mode's scale options have been edited to accommodate the new options. The Shadowcaster option has been condensed into the Scale Attachment option, and there's a trigger as well as a toggle. The toggle does what you expect, toggling between having attachments enabled or disabled. However, the trigger will enable or disable attachments for all currently spawned scale objects, depending on what the toggle is set to. This won't affect any new spawned objects, and you can still swap the team of existing objects to re-enable their attachments. There are also 2 new toggles available, first of which is called the Hide toggle. This will toggle whether or not scale objects under Brown Team are hidden or not, and if they're hidden, you can't forge with them. The other option is the Grids toggle, and this will toggle scale for specifically grids, which includes grids with the scale label, as well as grids spawned through the spawner label. The Grids toggle option technically has 3 options, one of which forces all grids to use scale, one of which forces all grids to not use scale, and finally, the option where it's contingent on whether or not scale is enabled or disabled. Speaking of spawner, the spawner label got a number of changes in this update. Spawn sequences 26 and onward have been completely redone. You can now spawn a damaged pelican variant on both Spire and Forge World. Much like the other pelicans you can spawn, these variants are not flyable, but they do have working turrets. Additionally, you can now spawn all variants of the semi-truck, which comes with the small flatbed, freighter flatbed, and tanker variants, as well as the no flatbed variant. I also added some destroyed vehicle variants for spawning, which for some reason allow you to operate either the vehicle or at the very least the turret. And finally, for vehicles, I gave you the ability to drive the Phantom that you can spawn with Spawn Sequence 20. Aside from that, the grid spawning feature has been changed some. Spawn sequences 34 and 35 now spawn an array of 4 grids in one of 2 configurations, and you can use set shape to shrink them down if desired. Oh, and you can spawn this wall that instantly blows up. I'm sure someone will find a use for this. On that note, the switch gate label now has an option for killing an object as opposed to deleting it. Use purple team to kill any object with the switch gate label when its switch is activated. I don't know why I didn't add this in sooner, but here it is now. I've also made the change to allow switches to be activated via entering their zones. Give any object with the switch label a zone, and when a player enters the zone, the switch will activate. The next major change is with the attach base and attachment system. It is being completely dumped in favor of a new system, which is more streamlined and focused on custom vehicle stuff. The new mod vehicle label only requires the vehicle base object in order to work, and it functions much like the spawner label, where different spawn sequences will give you different attachments for that vehicle. However, much like the attachment label, the object's team will determine the attachment offset, with some base vehicles having a default offset that's different than normal. Another option is to civilianize vehicles by setting shape on them. If you set shape on a vehicle, its weapons will be deleted. This replaces the spawner function that does the same thing. And the ability to simply disable weapons instead of outright deleting them has been removed. Notably, the new system lets you do custom attachments that you couldn't before, such as the Pelican turret, the Phantom turret, and the various truck flatbed variants. Additionally, Spawn Sequence -1 is a special option that will activate seat bypass for the pilot seat of the vehicle chosen. This was done specifically so you can pilot the Pelican. Now, normally you can't spawn in the Pelican, however, it is in the Forge menu just hidden. So if you use assembly to poke the Forge menu, you can spawn it, and Xbox players who have these Pelicans on their maps can move them around and forge with them. With that in mind, I'm going to be including a map on my file share that has a bunch of Pelicans, as well as some other objects that you can't normally get, for Xbox players to mess around with. The next big change is with map objects. I feel like I say this in every update, but I am 100% serious this time. I finally fixed map objects, and we can go back to using object reference, or object by index as it was previously known, and we can get rid of object teleport. Object reference also comes with some new and changed options as well, so for reference, here are all of them. Neutral team will keep the map object attached, and it's the only team that does it. Red team and blue team just detach normally. Green team activates Shadowcaster. Orange team makes the map object invincible. And purple team onward will activate Set Shape for the map object, which some objects do have shapes that affect what they do. As a little reminder, some, though not all, map objects will have their collision scale when you scale them with a scale zone. In order to get map objects working on every map, I had to make it so that every map spawns every object in every game type, even game type specific objects. So you'll find that on a lot of the stock maps, there are a lot of copies of objective objects, and on certain maps like Boneyard and Spire, the invasion objects specific to those maps will appear. as well as, sometimes, some game type specific objects that are not Forge objects, like these race barricades on Boneyard.
Custom. Capture the flag.
Next, I want to talk about out-of-bounds play. Thanks to advancements with Gametype scripts, we're able to play out of bounds while taking mostly full damage, and this is now coming to AnvilEditor. To set up a map for out of bounds play, simply use the Game Options label, Spawn Sequence 3. You'll want to place it somewhere out of the way that players can't get to, because they could mess themselves up if they touch it. The reason for that is that this script does not disable kill boundaries, it turns the entire map into a hard kill boundary, and the script also lets you survive inside hard kill boundaries. A few things to keep in mind when it comes to out of bounds play is that, first of all, there will be instances of 1 tick, or 1/60th of a second, where players will be invincible to all damage. This doesn't usually affect gameplay, but if you're thinking of doing this competitively, I would advise against it for that reason. Secondly, all vehicles will be instantly destroyed unless they have the mod vehicle label. This label is also applied to any vehicles that are script spawned. So Race, Invasion Slayer, and all the spawner vehicles, and so on, will work out of bounds.
Suicide. Race.
Out of bounds play has also necessitated changes on the forging side. By default, you are now invincible when you load up in Forge, although you can toggle it off. I also made a pretty radical change to all the game types, where I condensed all the game type labels into common labels with different spawn sequences. This was to ensure that players didn't have to exit AnvilEditor and go into a regular Forge mode to finish their map. These labels are the Game Objectives label, the Hill Oddball label, and the Game Res Zone label. Each of these labels does different things in the different game types, and so I ask that you reference the documentation, the download for which will be in the description below. And while I've tried to separate it out so that the objects don't have overlap between the game types, I couldn't do it for every game type. Back to the topic of game options, there are many more game options available than just out of bounds play. Spawn Sequence 0 will activate bro spawning on that map. Spawn Sequence 1 activates bro spawning, but without the option to spawn on other players, simply spawning at locations. Spawn Sequence 2 activates invincibility, but total invincibility. And as mentioned before, Spawn Sequence 3 activates out of bounds play. All of these are for specifically game options objects under neutral team. The game options object set to red team is used for per map scoring. Now, in order to accomplish this, I've moved the regular scoring from the usual section in the game type menu over to the game type specific options. This means there's much less options available in the game type menu, but per map, you can change the scoring without having to change the game type itself. Spawn Sequence -100 is equivalent to having no scoring limit. Spawn sequences -99 to -95 increment by 1. So -99 is 1, -95 is 5. From then on, the score will increment by 5. So spawn sequence -90, for example, is going to be 30. Spawn sequence 0 is equivalent to 480, and spawn sequence 100 is equivalent to 980. And then we have Orange Team, which can be used to set a player's loadout palette in-game. Aside from Invasion and Invasion Slayer, which already use the other loadout palettes, Spawn Sequence 0 will give you no palette, Spawn Sequences 1 to 3 will give you the Spartan tier palettes, and Spawn Sequences -1 to -3 will give you the Elite tiers. Anvil's Toolbar mode has received something of an update. For starters, it no longer automatically puts you in the Toolbar mode, instead requiring you to have to go in and out of Forge mode a few times, in rapid succession, in order to access Toolbar mode. This fixes any control-related glitches that occurred from going out of Toolbar mode and back into player mode. I've also redesigned the toolbar to be more efficient and make better use of the space. So now the scale options are in their own menu, and as you can see, we have monitors which use less object space. The only downside is that now player options will always target all players, but I don't think anyone was really using the player specifics of that anyways. This Anvil update is big, and I want to talk about, in general, some of the changes I made to the game types to accommodate this. First of all, Infection now uses alpha zombies, which is something that I just didn't realize for a while, that vanilla Infection, the base game type that you get, doesn't have alpha zombies, which is really bizarre. Back to the other game types, most of them have been whittled down quite a lot in order to accommodate the code changes I've had to put in. So there's a lot of small details involving waypoints, HUD elements, and sounds that are going to be a little bit different. I won't be going over every little change that I've made to every game type, because then we'd be here for much longer than necessary, but just know that there are going to be these small differences. This will be most noticeable by far with Invasion, which has a lot of extra objective stuff that I simply got rid of. Extra waypoints, extra sounds, and much like the other game types, I've had to change the labels up some. So once again, I refer you to the documentation for exactly how to set up Invasion. Finally, I want to point out that any of the game types will run on any map now, even if the map is not set up for that game type to work. So keep that in mind. This was one hell of an update to put together, and I have to apologize for how long it took me to put this together. A combination of work, life, and other factors really delayed this by a lot. With that said, this will be the final Anvil update, so do take advantage of everything I've added and changed in this update. And hopefully, some of you will stick around for what I do next with the channel. Whether or not you do, thank you for watching, and happy forging!